In the Best Interest is the title of the film, and it's actually a legal term. The legal term basically means that a court of law has to make a determination as to what's the best interest of the child, and in theory it should be gender bias. Our story, and In the Best Interest, is about our family going through the court system all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
And so I was wondering what cases you might add to that list of really landmark cases in the past.
Well, I do think there's one that stands out, and it's a counterpoint. I mean, people talk about the monumental cases, and you assume they're talking about the good ones, Marbury and Brown. I would say the third most significant case in the court's history was Dred Scott, in the sense that, well, Marbury and Brown are good examples of what to do in very challenging situations and how to handle it. Dred Scott's an example where things went terribly wrong, and you need to look at that and try to figure out why.
I think Dred Scott is a very interesting case, so from a historical perspective, I look at Dred Scott. I also look at Lair versus Robinson, which is one of your contemporary cases, which really, for me, was the eye-opener with respect to the respect that the law has for family. There are some very interesting cases, and the law is very clear with respect to family. One of the things I was not prepared for was this whole idea of a family rights movement. I didn't even know that a family rights movement existed until I actually got into family court. I've come across people from all walks of life. It doesn't matter your race, your gender, your sexual preference, your religion. Everybody pretty much has the same story in the movement. I was able to sit down with a few people who have a wide range of experience in the family court movement. I speak with a grandmother who basically wants some answers. She wants to know what are her rights. Her daughter unfortunately lost in a custody case in Germany. Her husband is a German, and the grandmother lives here in the United States. Well, if the German father has primary custody of the child and the grandmother lives here in the United States, then what are her rights? I interview her, and I think it makes a very interesting argument for grandparents who want to grandparent the child.
That she could be a part of it, and the culture here that is part of her. She's 50% American. Why rob her of that when she loves it so much? She's not saying she doesn't want to come.
I also interview an attorney, Mr. Rodriguez, who I think is a very dynamic individual, very passionate individual. The thing I like about Mr. Rodriguez is he's a believer. He is someone who believes in the law, he believes in the Constitution, he believes in the Congress, but yet he's a father who lost custody of his child.
Because the Constitution created a limited federal government.
Right.
And only those powers that the people gave, it has. All the other powers stay with the people.
Right.
And so all of this amnesty, this for the telecom companies, all of this absolute justice, all that's bullshit. And so in my son's case, they took him out, and then they refused to comply with the treaty to bring him back. They were supposed to bring him back for visitation. And that's where they're in trouble.
Another individual I interviewed is a young lady by the name of Marsha Maines. She is an advocate, a very staunch advocate. She's different because she, in her family court experience, she actually won. But yet she's advocating for fathers of all people. It's a very interesting perspective that she comes from, and I think you'll find her interview pretty interesting as well.
You know, here I was, this devout wife and mother, and had given up my career to stay at home with my kids, and all of a sudden my ex decides he wants to leave and go through a midlife crisis and start over somewhere else with somebody else. And I was like, no, what about the children? And it's always been about the children for me.
So all of these stories, not just my own story, but all of these stories are fascinating stories. And In the Best Interest looks at these stories, and it looks at my own. And it follows our experience all the way to the steps of the United States Supreme Court. And of course, everything is documented in the court of law, court records, court exhibits. And, you know, one of the things, if you don't, in watching a film like this, you will walk away with a very thorough understanding as to family law, appellate law, and constitutional law.